Welcome to Electric Perspectives, a podcast that explores the innovations and policies shaping the electric power industry and how America's electric companies are delivering the resilient clean energy we need to strengthen America's energy security and power our daily lives. This show is brought to you by EEI, the Edison Electric Institute, which represents all U.S. investor-owned electric companies. I'm your host, Brian Reel. In early May, EEI and energy industry partners, firefighters, scientists, tech innovators, and other stakeholders joined together to form the Partners in Wildfire Prevention Coalition. The goal is to advance actionable, evidence-based policy solutions that will make communities and the nation more prepared to handle the growing wildfire threat. On this episode, Jeff Ostermayer, EEI's Managing Director of Public Affairs, is joined by Chet, the Partners in Wildfire Prevention Communications Director, to discuss the new coalition and how we can work together to mitigate wildfire risks and protect vulnerable communities. This episode also is available on The Current, a podcast hosted on EEI's We Stand for Energy platform. You can learn more about Partners in Wildfire Prevention at preventwildfires.org. I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
I have Chet joining us, who is the spokesman for Partners in Wildfire Prevention. And we're going to talk a little bit about the issue that we're seeing pop up more and more around the country in wildfires. Chet, thanks for joining us.
Jeff, thanks for inviting me. Very happy to be here.
Terrific. Last week, the coalition launched, and congratulations on the successful launch. Can you tell us a little bit more about the coalition and the issue and why it was created?
Yes, thanks. Very excited about the launch. It went very well, so we're happy about that. So the coalition is a growing number of organizations who are banding together because we believe that there needs to be a national coordinated policy actions regarding wildfires. The problem is just getting worse all the time. Last year, nearly 9 million acres across America burned, 65,000 wildfires, roughly. Almost every state, every year, has wildfires. It's not just an issue confined to the mountain states or on the West Coast. I think we're all well aware of the tragedy in Los Angeles earlier this year. 30 people lost their lives. Go back to 2023. I think everybody remembers the big fires in Hawaii. 130 people lost their lives. The amount of damage being done, economic, just the Los Angeles fires alone, there are estimates I've seen as high as $130 billion in property damage. Economic damage, total $275 billion. So there is a huge growing challenge out there to manage wildfires. Hotter conditions, drier conditions, continued building, of course, as we are a growing nation, effects of storm damage from other storms leaving combustibles around. So all of that caused our group to kind of coalesce and say, wildfires don't respect state boundaries. They don't respect local boundaries. There needs to be a national effort to make sure that we have the best policies in place, the best actions in place, the best ways to prevent wildfires.
Can you tell us a little bit more about who are some of the coalition members?
Well, right now we have about 20 members and the list is growing, and we expect it to grow substantially once news of the coalition gets out there. And it's a pretty broad base of coalition members. We have the Latino Coalition, the National Black Chamber of Commerce, for example, go into the Rural Voices for Energy or for Conservation. People in the American Biomass group are there. Fire tech innovation, labor unions like the IBEW and the National Building Trades Council, Federation of American Scientists, energy companies and associations, a very broad coalition because they see this as a very broad problem.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty wide-ranging group more than just energy companies alone or energy-specific groups.
Right, because you look at this as a broad problem. About 90% of the fires come from other purposes. There are fires, of course, connected to energy infrastructure, but the impacts, for example, if you're not directly affected by a wildfire, the health impacts because of what's emitted into the air and how the local environment is damaged. Clearly, broad impacts for almost everybody in America because of this issue. Sometimes, and that's the reason for the coalition, is to keep up attention on this issue. When we have a big fire or fires like we had in Los Angeles this year or Hawaii 2 years ago, there's a lot of attention for a while. But then that attention kind of goes away. Obviously, some parts of the country pay more attention than others, areas of high risk. But as I said, every state has a risk of wildfires. We think the most important thing is to keep up that attention on it so that we can work together to make sure that the best solutions come up.
So in addition to kind of raising awareness and continuing to inform people about the issue of wildfires, what are really the goals of the coalition moving forward?
Well, the main purpose, as I think I mentioned, is to raise awareness around a comprehensive national strategy. Within that, the goals, number one, safety, community protection. That goes above all else. Second, and that ties to safety, is prevention, finding ways to not have wildfires happen, at least not as frequently. I don't know that we'll ever get to the point where we can completely eliminate them, but we certainly want to reduce the number substantially. Around that needs to be responsible investment. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There are policies that can be in place to help things, but sometimes you just have to go out and do things, make investments to reduce the risk. And then finally, make sure that there's the ability to have a rapid recovery. People have access to the resources they need to rebuild their lives, rebuild their businesses, to allow businesses to get back into business, to manage the whole process of recovery so that it goes as quickly as possible for people who have just been through incredible trauma.
So the focus seems to be federally focused. Aren't states and local governments taking some steps in this space? And would this undo any of that?
Now, that the goal isn't to undo or to unravel what many state and local governments have been doing. Many of them have been working very diligently at finding the best solutions. But as I said at the beginning, wildfires don't pay attention to boundaries. And so there are many communities that don't have the resources to have effective policies. At some point, I'm hoping that the coalition really becomes a resource center for organizations, for local governments who are looking for insight, looking for ideas and for help. We want to work with all of them because some of them have done some terrific work. So it's certainly not a way to undo what they've done or usurp what they've done. It's really to continue to work with them in a collaborative fashion with a very broad group of stakeholders, as we've talked about, to make sure that the best policies and the best practices come to light.
Given that we represent the investor-owned electric companies here at EEI, can you talk a little bit more about the work electric companies are doing in this space and really how we can ensure that they are best positioned to support national and economic security moving forward, especially when it comes to disasters like wildfires?
Well, electric companies have been working hard at this for quite some time. I'm aware of this. Lots of infrastructure work's being done by electric companies, things like undergrounding to reduce the fire risk, other types of what they call hardening, putting insulated wires up, strengthening the utility poles, the infrastructure. Increased vegetation management, better monitoring, better technology that makes them aware if there is a malfunction somewhere, and then proactive policies. For example, when high winds come up, as they do in many parts of the country, knowing when it's time to maybe temporarily shut down the electricity, inconveniencing some people perhaps, but protecting their safety more importantly. So there are lots of actions by the electric companies right now, by other energy companies right now, because they want to do the right thing, I think, and they live in those communities. There are people who are there, and so they're committing billions of dollars in investments in this area.
So is there really anything being done at the federal level right now, any pending legislation that would help electric companies with their fire prevention efforts and really other industries as well, like some of these other coalition groups, member groups, that are outside the industry? Is there anything up right now that could help this cause?
Well, I think one piece of legislation, there's a bipartisan, actually a pair of bills, they both go by the name Fix Our Forests, say that correctly. And what they're looking for, it's not necessarily just focused on electric companies or energy companies, but it's things that would benefit all of the stakeholders in this. It would promote a more collaborative federal, state, and local governmental effort. That collaboration is essential. It would give more access for energy companies to manage vegetation on federal lands. We know that's key to suppressing wildfires, is to remove the fuel, to manage the fuel. So getting more easy access, sometimes that can be a little difficult, to help communities access prevention technology. Again, as I said, many communities just don't have the resources to go this alone, and so they need some help. So, as I said, there are bipartisan bills in both the House and the Senate. And so we would like to see that kind of legislation continue to move forward.
Terrific. Is there anything else we've missed here today that we should be talking about in the wildfire space?
Well, I think the number one thing to remember is that it needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be cooperative. And that's how I think all of us need to approach this. This is why this coalition is so broad-based, because we know that the consequences are just too large to even describe, sometimes to even quantify the disaster, the devastation that happens as we've seen some of the big fires. So it needs to be something that really looks at all the stakeholders, knowing that everybody has a point of view, everybody has needs, as we all do, but to work together, because this issue is just too important to only think about every time there's a disaster in the news.
So that being said, what can some of the local communities and other industries really do to help prepare for the growing risk of wildfires? How can we all work together, different industries, and better work for prevention?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with making sure that everybody's at the table. Some local governments, some state governments are looking at infrastructure rules. Well, when you do that, I think you need all the parties there, including the energy companies and the contractors and the people who worry about building codes, et cetera. All those things need to be together. I think you need to. It's that kind of collaborative work, I think, that needs to be done across the country. Certainly, how homes are built and how buildings are built. Is there defensible space around that? Well, that's a conversation I think lots of people need to have. Where does that apply? All those things need to be worked together. There's no one thing that is the magic that will cause these wildfires to disappear, knowing that it's just all of these things working together that will make this work.
So thanks again for joining us, Chet. This has been a really enlightening conversation. How can our listeners learn more about this effort?
I think the easiest way is to go to our website. I won't list the URL because people don't remember them half the time. I don't anyway. But just search Partners in Wildfire Prevention. That's the name, again, of our group. And that will pop up at the top of your search. It should. And in there, you'll see information about our membership, about our goals, about the kind of efforts we're putting in place. We also you'll see us out on social, so you can follow us there. But that's the easiest way probably to find us.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Chet.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Best of luck with the coalition moving forward.
Thanks again. Yeah, we're really excited about it.
That's our show for today. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about EI's members and the electric power industry, visit our website at electricperspectives.com.